So here we're going to debone our turkey, and we're going for the turkey breast meat itself. We're not going to debone the legs or the thighs or the wings. So to start off, we have our whole turkey. We've already taken out the neck. We have purchased a turkey, so the neck already came as part of the turkey inside the cavity. We've already taken out the giblets, which are also inside the cavity. If you've gone out and you've harvested your own turkey, then you've probably already dealt with the neck and have done your own things with it. This is a great piece of meat to make stock out of, so we're going to put it in our bowl. For our purposes today, we're going to just put all of our extra pieces into the bowl, and later on I'll sort them out for things that will be used for stock. So that'll be the bones from the rib cage that we'll be taking out, and then the wings and the legs we're going to use for other meals later on, and we're going to cook those outright. So to get started, I've got a couple knives here. I've got a regular Santoku knife that I just feel really comfortable using. So this is going to be for some of our bigger cuts. I've got a fillet knife to help me go along the bone line, and then I've got a boning knife. You don't need each of these knives in order to do this. These are just the tools that I feel most comfortable with. Ideally, you do want a knife that is going to be a little bit flexible, and that's where my fillet knife comes into hand. So you can see it's a bit flexible. And the boning knife still does have a bit of flexibility, but just almost nothing. And the same thing with the Santoku knife. There's just almost no flexibility there. Those are my weapons of choice today. So let's go ahead and get started. We're going to work with the wings first and take those off the bird. So that's why I have the wings facing forward today. What we're going to do is we're going to make our cut into the wing joint, and we're going to follow the natural lines of the meat and follow the meat down to the joint. So let's go ahead and get started. Move that out a little bit. So what you might be able to see is that we're just kind of opening up the meat. We're headed towards the joint, which I can feel with my fingers is right down there. So I'm going to just cut around the ball joint of the shoulder or the wing area a little bit. There's a couple of tendons in there. I'm going to make sure those get cut. Perfect. I'm going to cut around it a bit. Perfect. I don't know if you could hear it, but there was almost a little like pop or snap when I got to the joint, so I kind of opened it up a bit. So now I can go ahead and pull the wing back. Let me move my knife. Move this piece of meat out of the way. So I don't know if you can see it, this is the top of the joint. So this is what we were headed towards. So we've done a pretty decent job. And we're going to kind of work the joint open, and we're also going to cut the meat around it. So there we go. You might have heard another pop sound, so it's opening the joint. So now we're going to cut around the joint to get the meat and the tendons cut around the joint. At this point, you can really just kind of work your way out. So at this point, we're not connected anymore, so we just need to cut right through. Perfect. All right. So again, this is the ball joint. This is where it connects to on the bird. Turn that so you can see it. And so what we did is we went in and we opened it up. So we're going to go ahead and put that aside. We're going to go do the same thing on the other side. Here we go. Got some of this meat on the side. Break it apart more easy. Woo. All right, cut all the way through. Again, there's that joint head. Go ahead and put that away. Okay, so now we're going to turn it around. Get started on the legs. I'm going to flip my bird over, and that's going to allow gravity to do some of the work for me. Again, we're going to head towards some joints and try to open those up and take the meat from there. So what we're going for is not just, let me turn it this way, not just the leg, but we're also going for the thigh, because the meat that we want is actually right here, and that's what we're going to end up with at the end of this demonstration. I'm going to cut away the skin right here. As you can see, there's already just a natural separation there. So if you want to, you can go ahead and put your hands in here, kind of work that leg open. Just going to cut some more skin away. This will help you see what's going on. You can find that joint a little easier. So what you're looking for is when you put your fingers in here, you're going to feel some meat. So it's going to be a bit softer, squishier, and then you're eventually going to land on something that kind of feels like a rock, and that's the joint that you're going to head for. So we're just going to, again, follow the lines of the meat, head towards the joint. It's okay if you get a little bit of turkey blood letting go at this point. That's totally natural. Go in a little deeper. All right. Oh, so we're just going to put a little bit of pressure. Again, we're going to let gravity work with us. and it's going to open up that joint. I don't know if you heard the suction or the popping, but that is exactly what we're looking for. So this joint is now open. Let's see if I can turn it this way. So this joint is now open. You can kind of see the head of that. So we're going to cut through the meat on the back side and then the front side, or you could do it the other way around. Now I'm going to go in for some of these tendons. There we go. Just keep cutting right through and it's just going to naturally release. Got a nice area here we're going to work with in a bit. So we're just going to flip our bird over. We're going to do the same thing on this side. Great thing is you get to practice this. Just cut through some tendons in the back. There we go. So there we go. Now we've got our thigh and our leg. Just going to put that to the side. Again, we'll be cooking those another time. So here we are going to work on the breast meat of the turkey. So as you can see, here's a natural line that we're going to be following for the breast meat. So this is what we're going for. There's still a decent amount of meat up here, but this is not what we're going for. This is going to be used later to make turkey stock. So at this point, I'm going to transition to my fillet knife because that's what I feel most comfortable with for working the meat away from the bone. Again, it has that flexibility in it that the other two knives, the boning knife and the Sentoku knife, do not have. All right. So at this point it gets a little slimy. I'm actually going to take a second to just kind of wipe things off. This bird's already dead. I don't want to chase it all the way across the kitchen. So. And so we talked about cross-contamination in our food safety video. This would be a nice opportunity to talk a little bit more about it. This is a raw poultry. It's already got some bacteria on it that can make you sick if you were to eat it raw. And all of these things that we have here are going to be sanitized later on with household sanitizers. And it's important at this point to not run around the kitchen and touch other things. If you're going to touch something with your hands, you need to wash it later as soon as you get done using it. Also really important if you're making a turkey dish or any sort of a raw meat dish near a dish that's going to be served raw as is. So for example, if you're working with this turkey and there's a salad nearby, you want to change that situation so that you're working with the raw meat on its own and the materials that are going to be used with the raw meat on its own, and that anything that's going to be served as is, so as a salad, that's off to the side being worked on in a completely different area. Another thing is if you only have one area to work, do your raw foods first. So make your salad first, put that in the refrigerator, and then start working on your meat. And that way you don't have to worry as much about cross-contamination. It's always a concern, but it's more of a concern if you've worked with the meat before you've started working with the foods that you're going to be serving as is or are ready to serve. So after that quick food safety announcement, we're going to go ahead and get started again. All right, so we're going to take our turkey, we're going to grasp it firmly. And I've cut some of the skin away so that I can see what I'm doing. And again, we're going to follow this line. I'm going to put my knife in at an angle and just kind of work gently towards the bone. And what I'm heading for is the actual rib bone so that I know where that is, and then I can start working the meat away from there. Alright, so I've just run my knife against the rib bone and I can hear it. So now I'm going to start to work my knife underneath the meat, in between the meat and the rib bone, and start to work around that way. I'm going to take this all the way down. I'm going to start angling my knife. There we go.
Can you stop for a sec?
Sure.
Turn
Turn it.
Yep, turn the bird. But wait, go back and turn the bird and say I'm going to turn it so you can see what I'm doing.
Okay. Alright, so I'm going to turn the bird so you can see what I'm doing. Alright. So again, we've got the meat here. Ooh, going to get underneath that. Be careful of be mindful of where your fingers are. You don't want to accidentally go through the turkey meat and into yourself. So again, I'm going to be grabbing this turkey meat and kind of pulling it back a little bit, keeping my fingers up and away from where the knife is going to be, and running my knife along where the bones are. I have some tendons here, so I'm just going to pull that nice and tight, cut through those. I'm going to turn it again so you can see. So just be careful as you get towards the breastbone of the turkey to not go through the meat or the skin. It won't be the end of the world, but we want to keep this breast intact so that we can stuff it later, and it'll be a little bit more difficult if we cut through the meat and the skin at that point. Push this forward a little bit. There we go. Bring this out a little bit more until it's mostly free. Now we're going to flip it over and I'm going to work on the other side. Alright, so again we're going to follow the line of the meat here. I'm just going to cut away this piece of skin so it's a little easier to see. Okay, here's a line. Just going to cut through any tendons that are down here. And again, our knife is running along the rib cage. You can hear that. Alright, so I'm just going to turn the bird so it's a little easier for you to see. Got some tendons in here. Again, be mindful of your fingers. I am going to go for that extra piece of meat right there, just a little one. It's alright to go in and check every now and then, make sure you're up against the bone. This tendon here that I have difficulties cutting, so I'm just going to go ahead and focus on that. And this is from the board. So I've got a piece of skin back here and it's kind of disorienting me from where I am, so I'm just going to cut right through it. Again, be mindful where your fingers are. Cut right on down through that skin. Make sure you're cutting the skin and not the meat. I'm going to put my knife in, cut through. There we go. And I'm getting really close to the center here. I mean, it's not very far. So I'm just going to keep diligently working, and I'm come here to the center part. So there's a bit of bone here, it's really small. I'm going to work my knife along that bone, trying hard not to break that bone. And again, I'm angling my blade towards the bone a bit. I'm not pressing down very hard, just letting the knife do the work for me. And at this point, which is right about halfway through, there's going to be a cartilage piece that's going to kind of protrude a bit up into the meat a little bit more. So I'm going to just pay really close attention to that. I've got to cut my meat on the sides away from that cartilage a little bit more before I can really identify how far that goes into the meat. So here I'm just going to cut a little further in. Again, keeping my knife against the bone. Not pressing down very hard. You don't want the bone to chip and break. Now I'm going to run my knife against that cartilage a little bit more. Being very diligent about this. Sticking the tip of the knife into the meat so that I can identify where I'm going. I finally found the top of that cartilage, at least on one side, so now I'm just going to run my knife along the top of that cartilage or piece of bone. And I can hear it going through to the cutting board beneath because it's really thin. I know you can't see it, but it feels like it's about, I don't know, maybe 1/8 of an inch, so it's really thin at that point. There's meat on either side of that, so I'm going in between those two pieces of meat and that cartilage. So I'm just going to move some of that meat away from the bone. So I'm going to lift up the turkey so that my meat's on one side and the bones are on the other. And hopefully you'll be able to see a little bit better where I'm going with this. Right. All right, perfect. So I'm going to flip this over so you can see what I'm talking about. So at this point, right here on the left side, over here, my left side, is the meat. And over here I can feel this cartilage or this piece of bone. I can feel the top of that. So now that I've identified that, I'm going to start to run my knife along the line here to cut the meat away from the bone, trying my best to maintain the breast whole rather than in two lobes. So I'm just going to hold my meat and pull it away from the cartilage a bit. And then I'm just going to gently almost tap my knife blade just a tiny bit where the meat meets the bone or that cartilage. And I'm going to continue to just make sure that the meat that I have is not sliding underneath the turkey. Like I said, it does get a bit slippery. Be mindful of where your fingers are. We're getting pretty close. I'm going to hold my meat, turn it up one way. I'm going to just let gravity kind of help me out here. That bone comes up a bit, so I'm trying to feel where that bone is. I'm going to turn it around, start working on the other side. Just doing the best that I can to make sure that I don't cut through the meat. You can see that, yeah. Actually, I'm not going to let gravity help me out. Flip sides, now the meat is now on my right, the bones are on the left, and I'm just going to pull that meat away. So, there it is. Here we go, last couple cuts, there we go. And as you can see, it's a cartilage or bone. It's not exactly flat and it's not exactly curved, so it comes from a lower stance, comes up to a ridge, goes down a bit, and then kind of up here it comes up just the tiniest bit again. So it's a bit of a bear to work around, but that's what we were really working hard on this last piece. And it's tough because you don't want to cut through the meat where it meets. So where that bone was right in here. And so as you can see, it's really thin right here. That's the skin actually. We wanted to keep this piece of meat intact. And that's so that we can use it for our stuffed turkey breast. So this is our rib cage. It does have a bit of meat on it. We're going to use this for stock. I'm just going to set it aside for now. Now I'm going to work on taking the skin off of this turkey. There's this layer between the skin and the meat that's pretty easy to tear, so you should just be able to kind of come along. I'm actually going to use a piece of paper towel. Try my hands a little bit and just kind of grab that meat. Excuse me, I'm going to grab the meat with one hand, put my pressure on it. I'm going to grab the skin with a paper towel. The paper towel is going to kind of grip to the skin a little bit. I'm going to start to pull that skin away from the meat. Comes off pretty easy. So I've done it on one half. I'm going to do it on the other half now because again the center of the breast is pretty thin compared to the sides, so I just want to make sure that when I get to the center, I can pay a lot of specialized attention to that. You want to make sure you get all the skin off. You don't want any of it to start hiding up at the tip, up at the top of the breast. There we go. Okay. At this point, I just feel more comfortable cutting it away, so I'm going to take my fillet knife. I'm going to make a couple of cuts in that layer. So again, this is the layer between the meat and the skin. I'm just going to make a couple cuts into that. Again, be mindful of where your fingers are. Just going to finish cutting away the skin. And at this point, we'll actually just pull away. So we have the skin there, that will be composted later. And so we have these giant tendons in here. These are not going to cook away. So I'm going to again take my paper towel. I'm going to try to pull them out as far as I can from the meat. I'm just going to run my knife against the tendon and try to cut away as much meat from that as I can. That in the bowl, same thing on this side. You'll be able to see a little bit better. So here again is that tendon, the outside of the breast. We're going to angle our knife towards the tendon, cut the meat away from the bone, from the tendon. Just going to get that as far in there as we feel comfortable without losing too much meat. Just cut that off. All right. All right, so this is what your turkey breast is going to look like. So if you've gotten this far, well done.